6 years ago, I started this YouTube channel. At the time, it wasn't a laptop review channel, but one of the first videos I made was a laptop review. You see, I was searching for a laptop for me. I wanted it to be capable of programming, video editing, and gaming, the do-it-all laptop that was also portable. The quintessential laptop of the time was the Aero 15. It was good, but it just didn't live up to the hype, and people really liked that I was actually calling out its issues, not just singing its praises like most reviewers of the time. Well, today, the big question is this redesigned Aero X16 finally the ultimate portable performance laptop? And since I value your time, I'm not going to make you watch this whole video to find out. Instead, I'm just going to tell you right now. The Aero X16 is a completely different beast to its predecessor. Instead of trying to compete as a high-end laptop, it's now the value pick. It's certainly not perfect. In fact, it actually doesn't do particularly well for its supposed target market, creators. Its screen colors aren't great and it's missing an SD card reader. But when you look at what you're getting for the money, it delivers tremendous value. You're getting a laptop that is powerful enough for programming, for gaming, and for video editing that is also light and portable with good battery life. And it doesn't have obnoxious heat or fan noise. It's already gone on some pretty significant sales too, which you can find on our website bestlaptop.deals. With that said, here's my review of one of my favorite laptops of 2025, the Gigabyte Aero X16. The Aero's chassis is certainly not going to win any style awards, but it's nice enough. Although it might not look as nice as laptops like the Blade 16, the Aero does not pick up fingerprints. Size-wise, it's a little bigger than a MacBook Pro 16 and similar to the Razer Blade 16. The Aero's keyboard deck does slope down a little bit, but it doesn't completely avoid the issue where the laptop's edge cuts into your wrist without adequate wrist support. If you are sensitive to that sort of thing, this one still does it a little. The Aero is pretty light compared with other laptops in its class. This weight gap widens even further when you factor in its charger. It is a very light 150 watt one. Holding the laptop, it feels nice and sturdy, including the lid. However, there is a little bit of keyboard deck flex. Looking around the laptop, you're going to see one of the worst things about it, the ports. They're right up the front of the laptop. If you plug anything in that has a cable, it's going to get in the way of your mouse hand. In fact, if you are left-handed, this laptop, it's pretty much a no-go. Both charging-capable ports, the barrel pin and USB-C, are on the left side. You'd think the barrel pin would at least be right-angled so that the cable could stay out of your way, but it isn't. It sticks right out, so as I said, if you're left-handed, using a mouse with this laptop, it's going to be a struggle. Also, there's only one USB-C Thunderbolt 4 port. Most laptops like this one have two. If you are charging via USB-C, be careful. Firstly, you want to use a 20-volt USB-C charger. Most modern gaming laptops now require that. And secondly, this laptop gets significantly warmer to the touch when you are charging via USB-C, not the barrel pin. This is an issue that just occurs on many laptops right now, and I don't like it. Microsoft Surface has the issue, Dell's 14 Premium also has it. Guys, it is super annoying and manufacturers have to get on top of this. Anyway, back on the ports. You also get a 1 gigabit Ethernet port, an HDMI 2.1 port, and a headphone mic combo jack. And then there's 3 USB-A ports, one of which is crazy slow. The laptop also has no SD card reader, as I said, which is unfortunate as it's supposed to be a creator laptop. Let's talk about the display. Our Aero's display is a 16-inch panel with a resolution of 2560 by 1600, a max brightness of just under 500 nits, and a refresh rate of up to 165 Hz. Now, one thing I really like about the Aero's display is that it is a matte panel. That's pretty rare these days. I actually wrote part of this review on the Blade 16 at a local coffee store, and that one has a glossy panel. I literally found myself constantly angling it to avoid reflections. I didn't have to do any of that with this Aero. So great screen for students or anyone planning to use their laptop in a bright environment. Anyway, thus far, all of this is exactly what you'd want to see in a laptop's display. But this display is also where Gigabyte has obviously cut back, so it hits at a certain price point. The most noticeable of which is the panel's colors. If you place this laptop next to another one, you're definitely going to notice that the colors are off on the Aero. If this is your only laptop like most people, you probably won't notice this, but this is certainly not a laptop to buy if you plan to do professional color work. Rounding out the display, there is a mux switch if you want the display to run directly from the dedicated GPU, but you will have to set that in the BIOS, which is annoying. The laptop does not support G-Sync, but it does support AMD's FreeSync. We detected no PWM flickering, which is good, but we did detect a little bit of backlight bleed. Finally, there is another panel available with a resolution of 1920 by 1200 and only 300 nits of brightness. This is a huge step back from the one that we have. That resolution is well below what we would consider crisp on such a large display. Unless that model is significantly cheaper, I'd avoid it. The keyboard has a standard layout and the arrow keys are nice and separate. I didn't mispress keys on the arrow like I do on many other laptops. The keyboard's backlight is a single zone RGB. When you do press the keys, there is plenty of travel, but the typing just feels a little mushy. Part of this is due to the key press themselves. You just don't feel a defined click like there is on Lenovo's keyboards. The other reason for the mushiness is the keyboard deck flex. Also, if you type hard in the center of the keyboard, you can at times hear a little rattle. Overall, typing on the Aero feels fine, no major problems, but if you are comparing this laptop to higher end ones like the Yoga Pro 9i, you're definitely going to notice that that keyboard feels more comfortable. Before we move on, there is an additional key placed to the left of the delete key that allows you to call up Gigabyte's Gmate software. This is where you change performance modes and other things. Inside of it is one of those gimmicky AI tools, but to my absolute shock, I told it to change the keyboard color to red and it worked. However, when I asked it to turn on the mux switch, it didn't know how to do that. So there's still work to be done, but it's good to see some progress. Unfortunately though, the app as a whole, it isn't great. It just takes a really long time to apply certain settings. These manufacturers of hardware, they are terrible at creating software. The trackpad is outright the best mechanical trackpad I've used. I know this might sound like a little bit of a shock, but it is really good. Tracking feels really natural and the click is surprisingly accurate. Perhaps left-handers can actually use this laptop after all, so long as they use the trackpad and not a mouse. Okay, let's get into performance. I was really eager to see how this laptop would do. You see, it's the first one we've seen with a Ryzen 7 processor paired with powerful dedicated graphics. Normally we'd see a more powerful Ryzen 9 or Intel Core 9 CPU. By the way, there is actually a version of this laptop with a Ryzen 9 processor. You'll find it over at bestlaptop.deals. Anyway, back on this Ryzen 7 version, in Geekbench, a CPU benchmark that tests common performance tasks, it comes out last of its competitors. A little better than the Intel Core Ultra 9 from last year due to this CPU's faster single-core performance. By the way, the Blade 16, it actually has a Ryzen 9 CPU. It is a little less powerful than the 371 available in the other configuration of the Aero. At least in my configuration of the Blade. But keep an eye on the scores from that particular laptop if you are considering the higher version of the Aero. Switching over to Cinebench, which tests the CPU when it's under max load. It falls even further behind. Look, I want to be clear. This is very good CPU performance for something like a thin and light Ultrabook. This laptop is not going to feel slow. It's just not at the level of modern creator laptops. Let's now double-click in and look at power draw during this high-performance test. No surprises, it isn't that much. It's around the same as the Omen Transcend 14 feeds its Intel processor, and that is kind of disappointing as that laptop performs quite a bit better. Continuing with the internals, CPU core temperatures are fine. Let's now take a look at GPU performance, because most people, they aren't just buying this laptop for CPU-only tasks. We're going to start with creator workloads, as that's what the Aero is kind of advertised for, as I said. In Premiere Pro, this laptop does pretty well, within striking distance of more expensive creator laptops. In DaVinci Resolve though, not as much. I believe this is because Resolve, it just makes much better use of hardware, and AMD CPUs, they don't have quick sync like Intel's ones. Let's now take a look at some gaming benchmarks, starting with TimeSpy. Here, this laptop falls exactly where you would expect for an 85-watt 5070. It's more powerful than the 75-watt 5070 in the Transcend 14, and a little ahead of the high wattage 5060 in our Yoga Pro 9i. By the way, in this graph you can clearly see that the Blade 16 does something similar to the Aero in pairing its GPU with a low wattage AMD CPU, essentially allowing more of its power envelope to go to the GPU. In fact, it's clear that the Blade is feeding its AMD CPU even less power during gaming than the Aero, which is why the Blade CPU score is worse here. Switching to Port Royal or ray tracing benchmark, the Aero does pretty well. This is really where you start to see the 5070s pull ahead of the 5060s. Both 5070 laptops in our test suite are pulling ahead of those much higher wattage 5060s. But how does the Aero game? Well, in Cyberpunk at the screen's native resolution with upscaling on and frame gen off, even at ultra settings, you can get above 60 FPS on average, but 1% lows are a bit rough. In Forza, with DLSS completely off, it does a bit better. Moral of the story, you can certainly game at this laptop's native resolution, but you may need to turn down those settings. Now, thus far, all the results I've shown you are on the laptop's high stock performance modes. Here's the difference between the Aero's modes when doing a very CPU-intensive task. Balance, gaming, and gaming, even with max fans, they're all about the same in terms of their performance and power fed to the CPU. Normally when this happens, we'd say just stick to the default balance mode, as that tends to be the best balance of heat and fan noise for performance, but it isn't on the Aero. The gaming mode actually has less fan noise and makes the laptop's keyboard feel cooler. If you are doing something that utilizes the GPU, like playing Forza, we see a difference between balance and gaming. It appears the gaming mode does feed the GPU more power. It is slightly louder though for that increased performance. I was a bit worried that the laptop's 150 watt charger wouldn't be enough. But when you look at this table, you can clearly see that on average its CPU and GPU are only fed about 100 watts. Now, in the real world, I played a lot of games on this laptop, for research purposes only. Anyway, after several hours, the laptop felt a little warm, but it felt cooler than my Blade 16 or HP's smaller Omen Transcend 14. When doing CPU-intensive tasks, it was around the same, it felt a little warm. In light use though, the Aero was dead silent and felt cool to the touch. That is so long as you're using the barrel pin charger. This is a good step forward for Gigabyte by the way. Their older Aeros, they always had a bit of fan noise even in their quiet mode. The only negative in terms of heat and fan noise is that hot air does blow out the vents on the side of the laptop, particularly on the right side. I personally just don't use my mouse towards the back of the laptop, so this doesn't bother me, but I know some people will care about it. If you want to see how this laptop compares to others, the heat you feel is around the middle of the pack when it's under load, but definitely do not put this laptop on your lap when you're doing something like this. It just gets very hot underneath. Fan noise in this scenario is also about what we'd expect. Now when gaming, it's a good story amongst its competitors. It ties to what I experienced. It gets slightly warm, but better than other laptops. Its fan noise though during gaming, it is very loud, at least on the gaming mode. You'll need to run on balance mode if you want less fan noise. When you unplug the Aero, its max performance doesn't drop by much. When it comes to battery life, it is very good, amongst the longest of laptops that have a dedicated GPU, so well done Gigabyte here. When it comes to the speakers, I've heard clearer before, I've heard better bass before, and I've heard louder. How the 1080 webcam looks and sounds of the Gigabyte Aero X16. I'm using studio lighting conditions, so it's probably the best possible lighting conditions. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned is there is a Windows Hello facial recognition camera at the top of the display to get you locked in fast. Now, if you turn off those studio lights and just use the dimmer room lights, here's what you're going to look like, a bit of a pumpkin. We tested Fedora 42, everything worked. Brightness up and down, the camera, Wi-Fi, speakers, Bluetooth, you guys get the picture. The only thing that didn't, which was really weird, was the FN key actually did mic mute, so perhaps there are some keyboard mapping issues. Upgradability is a strong suit of the Aero. Memory is upgradable. The Wi-Fi 6E card is upgradable, although I'd really prefer it to have Wi-Fi 7. And there are two SSD slots. One is PCIe 4 4-lane and the other is PCIe 4 2-lane. So let's wrap. At the time I filmed this video, the 5060 version was $1,100 down from $1,500, and the 5070 version that we have in was $1,300 down from $1,650. The Aero X16 clearly has its downsides as I showed you, but when you factor in its price, it's a winner. In fact, it is one of those rare laptops that's actually worth buying at its MSRP. And when it goes on sale, phenomenal deal. In fact, the Aero is so much cheaper than its competitors, it kind of puts it in a different pricing tier entirely. More comparable to Lenovo's cheaper portable performance laptop, the IdeaPad Pro 516. But that laptop caps out at a far less capable 5050. If you're shopping around the $1,000 to $1,300 price point, the Aero, it's kind of in a league of its own. And if you do want to buy one, make sure to check out our website, bestlaptop.deals, so you can get a great price on it just like I did. We have a price tracker there that tracks prices right across retailers. You can even set custom price drop notifications. Let me know with a comment below what you think of the Aero X16. Until next time, go do something awesome with your day, and I will catch you later.